Rain pelted the pavement like 1,000 tiny war drums, and in the middle of it all, she stood soaked, defiant, and surrounded. Her name was Emily Carter, the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, but right now, titles didn't matter. The menacing group closing in on her didn't care who she was. They saw power, wealth, and a target. What they didn't see, what they couldn't possibly know, was the man standing quietly just a step behind her. His name was Jack Hayes. A single dad. A veteran. And once upon a time, a Navy SEAL whose hands had saved lives and ended fights in places most people couldn't imagine. Before I take you into this storm, remember, stories like this happen when courage meets the unexpected. If you believe in standing up for what's right, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me until the end. You're going to want to see what happens next. It all started in a quiet corner of a downtown coffee shop. Jack had been there for his usual afternoon coffee, wearing his worn leather jacket and the kind of expression only people who'd seen too much carried. Emily had walked in with confidence, tailored suit, heels clicking on the tiles, but Jack noticed something beneath it, a kind of exhaustion in her eyes. The corporate world wasn't for the faint of heart, and hers had been under siege lately. Rival companies had been spreading lies, hackers had attacked her systems, and now, just that morning, her head of security had mysteriously quit. Jack had no idea about any of that. He was just a stranger enjoying a cup of black coffee. But fate doesn't ask for permission. When Emily left the cafe, Jack happened to follow her out, intending to cross the street to pick up his daughter from her music lesson. That's when they appeared. 6 men at first, stepping out of the shadows. They weren't just street thugs, they had the look of hired muscle. Their leader, tall, scarred, eyes as cold as wet stone, smirked at Emily. "Nice watch, sweetheart. Why don't you hand it over before we take more than that?" Emily's heart pounded. She knew who sent them. This wasn't about the watch. This was intimidation, a warning to back off from a deal she was about to close. She tried to speak firmly. "I'm not giving you anything. Walk away." That's when Jack noticed her hand trembling. Not from weakness, from holding her ground against fear. He could have walked away. He didn't owe her anything. But something about the way she stood there, refusing to bend, stirred the protector in him. He stepped up, his voice low and calm. "The lady said walk away." The men laughed. One spat on the ground. "Or what? You her boyfriend?" "No," Jack said, his tone razor-sharp. "But I'm the worst mistake you'll make today." They didn't listen. They never do. The first man lunged toward Emily, and that's when Jack moved. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. He simply exploded into action. A precise strike to the wrist, a twist, and the man was on the ground screaming. Two more rushed him, but Jack flowed between them like water, his fists a blur. Years of training surfaced, controlled, devastating, efficient. One by one, they fell, groaning on the wet pavement. Emily stood frozen, rain dripping from her hair, watching as this quiet man dismantled a team of professionals without breaking a sweat. But just when she thought it was over, more men appeared from a nearby van. 10. 15. 20. The alley seemed to close in with bodies. Jack glanced at Emily. "Stay behind me." What followed was a blur of motion, a symphony of impact. Jack wasn't fighting to impress anyone, every move was about ending threats as quickly as possible. He ducked under a swing, elbowed one man in the ribs so hard he crumpled, spun, and kicked another into a wall. Emily couldn't believe it, she was counting in her head. 15 down, 20, 30. Every time one hit the ground, another took his place. By the time the last man fell, groaning and clutching his stomach, there were nearly 50 bodies scattered across the rain-slick street. Jack was breathing hard but steady, his eyes scanning the area for more threats. Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling. Who are you?" He looked at her for a long moment. Just a dad trying to get to his kid's piano recital. That was the last thing she expected him to say. In the days that followed, Emily couldn't stop thinking about him. She had her security team investigate, not to pry into his past, but to thank him properly. That's when she learned about his Navy SEAL history, his years of service, the medals he never talked about, and the quiet life he lived now, raising his daughter alone after his wife passed away. Emily invited him to lunch to thank him, but the conversation turned into something more. They spoke about resilience, about not backing down from bullies, whether they wore leather jackets or $1,000 suits. Jack didn't just protect her that night, he reminded her of who she was. She went back to work with a fierceness she hadn't felt in months, and when her rivals tried again to intimidate her, she smiled. "You don't scare me," she told them. And as for Jack, he went back to being a single dad, still attending piano recitals and cooking burnt pancakes on Sunday mornings. But every now and then, he'd get a call from Emily, asking if he'd join her at some business dinner, just in case. He always said yes. Because sometimes, the right person shows up at the right time and changes the ending completely. If you believe in standing up for others, in protecting those who can't protect themselves, then don't just watch the story, share it. Let it remind the world that real strength isn't in the size of your muscles, but in the size of your heart. Weeks later, the incident had all but faded from the headlines, but for Emily and Jack, it was far from forgotten. Emily had doubled her company's security protocols, hired new staff, and made bold moves that left her rivals scrambling. Jack, meanwhile, kept living quietly, as if the night of 50 men had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience between coffee and a school pickup. But fate wasn't done with them yet. It was a Friday evening when Emily called Jack again, not for protection this time, but for company. She had a charity gala to attend, and while she could have taken any number of business partners or friends, she wanted someone she could trust, someone who wouldn't play games. Jack hesitated. Fancy events weren't his thing, but when she mentioned it was raising money for veterans' families, he didn't need more convincing. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and polite laughter, but Jack could spot the wolves in the crowd. Men and women in tailored suits, eyes calculating, smiles hiding sharp teeth. Emily navigated them with grace, but Jack noticed how a few of her so-called peers still tried to corner her, their comments laced with subtle threats. One man, a rival CEO with too much cologne and too little self-awareness, leaned in too close. "I heard you've got some muscle these days. That true, Emily? Can't fight your own battles anymore?" Jack didn't move at first, letting Emily handle it, but she glanced at him over the man's shoulder, a silent signal. Jack stepped forward, his presence alone making the rival step back. "She fights her battles just fine," Jack said evenly. "But some battles aren't worth her time. That's where I come in." The man scoffed, muttering something about bodyguards with attitudes, and slinked away. Emily smirked. "I think I'm starting to like having you around." The night went smoothly after that, until the parking garage. They were halfway to Emily's car when the air changed. Jack felt it before he saw them, shadows moving between the cars, the faint scuff of shoes on concrete. 5 men emerged first, then 10 more. These weren't street-level thugs, they moved with precision. Ex-military, maybe mercenaries. Jack's mind calculated distances, exits, and weapons in seconds. Emily tensed beside him. "You really do attract trouble," he said under his breath. "Pretty sure it's not me they're here for," she replied. The leader stepped forward. "Hayes. Our boss sends his regards. You embarrassed him last time." Jack didn't bother replying. Talking time was over. The fight erupted in a blur, heavier than last time, faster, more dangerous. These men knew how to hit. But Jack knew how to end it. He flowed between them like a storm, turning their own momentum against them, using every ounce of his training. Emily stayed low behind a car, watching with her heart in her throat. By the end, the garage floor looked like a battlefield. Jack's knuckles were raw, his breathing heavy, but he was still standing. The mercenaries were not. Emily approached slowly, her voice softer than usual. "You didn't have to." "Yeah, I did," Jack interrupted. "Bullies don't stop unless someone stops them. Doesn't matter if they're in back alleys or boardrooms." Something in her chest shifted then. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was trust. Real, deep trust, the kind you can't buy or fake. From that night on, Emily didn't just see Jack as the man who had saved her life twice. She saw him as an